Hey guys, how's everything going? Well, today we are going to start looking at our algebraic expressions, and specifically, how do we identify the parts of an algebraic expression? To do this, though, we are going to have to spend some time going over some vocabulary. I know it's not the most popular thing, and I know you're probably saying to yourself, we just did a ton of this in the last video, and yes, we did. But we've got some more here. And these are specific to our algebraic expressions. And these are going to be terms we are going to use pretty much throughout the entire year. And so they're really important for us to understand here. So let's just walk through these quickly. You should have these in your notes. So please follow along with me and fill in the blanks here. A variable. They are symbols, normally letters, used to represent an unknown value. We know it is a value. We know it is a number. We just don't know what it is. So we make it a variable. Next up is our terms. Terms are numbers, variables, or the products of numbers and variables, which are separated by addition or subtraction. This is important to be able to identify the number of terms because it helps us classify our algebraic expressions, which leads us into our next word. Algebraic expressions is a mathematical sentence with one or more terms. We can see how terms are building into the next definition there. Now, a coefficient is a part of a term. Specifically, it's the value being multiplied by the variable or variables in a term. And we'll see some examples of these in just a little bit. A constant is a special type of term. It's a term with no variable. When we look at a constant, we're just going to see a number value. We're not going to see any variables. Now, factors are actually parts of a term as well, but they are the values being multiplied in a term. And again, we're going to look at an example of this, and so we can better understand what is meant by something being called a factor. Well, some of our algebraic expressions have specific names, and we can see 4 of them down below here. So let's take a look. Our monomial is an algebraic expression with one term. That kind of prefix mono, that's kind of meaning one, right? You think about it, if you get mono, nobody's hanging out with you. You are all by yourself, just one person alone. How about binomial? We hear that bi in front of the word. Bi we hear in bicycle, which has how many wheels? 2 wheels. So a binomial is going to have 2 terms. Same deal with the trinomial. Tri we hear in tricycle, and how many wheels are there in a tricycle? 3. So we hear that 3 terms in our trinomial. Now, if it has 4 or more terms, we're going to call it a polynomial. We're not necessarily going to give it a specific name at that point. So these are some important vocabulary words. If you got any questions on these, again, make sure you write them down, bring them into class, we'll talk about them. So now that we have the vocabulary out of the way, let's actually start applying some of it, and let's identify some of our individual terms and parts of our algebraic expression. Our algebraic expression below, we've got 5xy minus g cubed plus 11 plus 19c squared b. So let's go through some questions here that'll help us understand our vocabulary and identify our parts here. First question, how many terms are there in the expression above? I'll give you a second to think. How many did you think? Did you say 4? We can see there are 4 specific individual terms in this expression. Again, they are separated by addition and subtraction. So I know 5xy stops, and a new term starts after that subtraction symbol. Same deal with the addition signs. That's how I know there's 4 terms there. So now that we have identified the terms, let's look at the first term. How many factors are in that term? Remember our definition of factors. So what do you think? How many factors are there in the first term? Survey says 3. We can see that we are multiplying 5 times x times y. There are 3 individual quantities being multiplied in this term. So there are 3 factors. Next question. Which term is a constant? As we look at each of these terms, remember what the definition of a constant was. Hopefully you said 11 was our constant, the third term. Notice we have an addition sign, an 11, and then an addition sign. There are absolutely no variables in between those addition signs, so we know that that's a constant. Let's talk about our other C word there, the coefficient. We can't get these mixed up. It's very easy to get these flipped around. It's happened before to a lot of students, so let's make sure we get these really clear. What is the coefficient in the 4th term? So we're looking at just the 4th term. Think back to our vocabulary word. Which one do you think it is? Did you say 19? I hope you did, because 19 is the correct answer there. We can see that 19 is a number that's being multiplied by the variables there, and each term is going to have a coefficient. Which brings us to our last question here. What is the coefficient of the second term? Now, I just said each term has a coefficient, but it sure doesn't look like there's a coefficient in the second term, right? Well, what we have is a -1 for the coefficient. Even though we don't see a 1 in front of the g cubed, it's actually hiding right in between the subtraction sign and the g. And you know what else hides? Ninjas. Right there are ninjas everywhere. And I bet you didn't know that there were ninjas in mathematics. And here's the deal, guys. We're going to learn about ninjas all over math. This is just the first. This is our coefficient ninja. And I will tell you, there have been many a student that have forgotten to look for the coefficient ninja, and he has jumped out of the shadows and stabbed them, and they have gotten the problem wrong because of it. So we cannot allow those coefficient ninjas to be stabbing up our algebraic expressions and causing us to lose points on tests and quizzes and on homework. So make sure we're paying attention for those ninja coefficients that are just hiding in front of those variables there. Great. So now that we've kind of walked through some examples here, I want you to try some on your own. In a second, I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and what I want you to do for each of these algebraic expressions below, I want you to identify the number of terms, and I want you to identify the coefficient of each term. So, get ready and pause. Okay, let's see how you did. Take a look at each of these. Notice the first one has 2 terms. It's a binomial. Notice we said that the second coefficient isn't really a coefficient. We just called that term a constant. Technically, there is no coefficient in a constant term because the number is not being multiplied by any variables there. We can see term 2 had 3 terms. That would have been a trinomial. The third example had 4 terms, so we would just call that a polynomial. And then 4, again, had 2 terms, which would be a binomial. If you have questions on any of these, please make sure you write them down and bring them to class, and we'll talk about them, because it's going to be really important that we have this skill down of identifying the parts and using our vocabulary here with our algebraic expressions. Well, I know none of you are as happy as this guy that we've reached the end, because you just love math, and you wish we could keep talking about this, like for another hour or so. But, unfortunately, we have reached the end of our video for today. So, again, hope you learned something here, and we'll see you next time.